Beirut was declared a disaster city. The footage of the destruction of Beirut's port has shocked the world. A massive blast ripped through the port in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, killing at least 135 and wounding 5,000 others until this hour. The blast damaged buildings across a country grimly familiar with upheaval, but never at this level. With every hour passing, we were logically supposed to fathom what happened and adapt. It is not happening. With every passing hour, we drown in more pain and more shock. We look around in a wave of silence with no answers. Our children who were traumatized ask us, "What happened?" We have no answer. We just look into their innocent eyes and see the mushroom cloud rising all over again in their pupils. Then after a few seconds of silence, we reply, "An explosion." Officials have said it was caused by the detonation of chemicals stored there without saying whether it was an accident or an attack. The tragedy piles yet another layer of hardship on my country, which is already reeling from the worst financial crisis in its history. The calamity is the worst Lebanon has suffered in decades. And citizens already fed up with government mismanagement are furious that the blast was set off by an improperly stored cache of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, which is equal to 1,800 tons of TNT. Beirut's hospitals are overwhelmed, and some were severely damaged in the blast. Some patients were being treated in parking lots under smartphone flashlights as the power was cut off due to the blast. Corruption and nepotism is my country's disease. This is the Mideastream, and I am in mourning. A massive blast that ripped through the port in Lebanon's capital, Beirut, killed dozens, wounded thousands, and damaged buildings across the country, grimly familiar with upheaval. Officials have said it was caused by the detonation of chemicals stored there, without saying whether it was an accident or an actual attack. The tragedy piles yet another layer of hardship on a country already reeling from the worst financial crisis in its history and struggling to contain a growing coronavirus outbreak. To discuss this issue with us from Beirut is Dr. Jamal Wakim, University professor. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Jamal, and I hope you and your family are well after this catastrophic tragedy.
Thank God.
2,750 tons of confiscated ammonia nitrate were hoarded between the years of 2013 and 2014 at Beirut's port number 12.
Yeah.
They were impacted with a spark of fire. This is the official scenario, produced what possibly is the largest chemical explosion after Nagasaki. Who is to blame, and why are the Persian Gulf media outlets repeating the word Hezbollah every time they want to talk about the Beirut explosion?
Well, with regards to storing these risky materials, I believe that it was out of neglect, negligence, and of course corruption, because it seems that officials in the state each was trying to sell this material to one side or another, favorite to him. So that's one factor which kept this risky material in the port. Of course, in ill conditions, but there could be also a possibility of a perpetrator who ignited the fire. Especially that the port is not well secured and it could be easily infiltrated from outside.
You mean anyone could have walked in?
There is a possibility, yes. So especially with the internet division in Lebanon and with people divided in their loyalties and their affiliations. So this is a possibility. Why the Gulf media is trying to blame Hezbollah? Because I believe that it's not only the Gulf media, but it's also Western media that is trying to lay the blame on Hezbollah, because the West mainly and its Lebanese allies are trying to capitalize on the event in order to call for international mandate over the port and the airport, and under the claim of neutrality on one hand, and on corruption of any local investigative team that could handle the case, that they don't have trust in any local team. So I believe that they are trying to capitalize on this in order to put the port and the airport under international, let's say, control. And it was also coupled by attempts to shift the role of the UNIFIL in Lebanon in order to give it prerogatives of acting and not as a peacekeeping force, but rather as an occupying force that would protect the borders on behalf of the Israeli entity. So all these attempts come hand in hand. I believe that there are attempts to benefit from the West, to benefit from the occasion.
Dr. Joachim, the damaged port also wiped out the grain silos. Lebanon imports 80 to 90% of its grain, and they're destroyed. And if not the only lifeline for importing during a sanctions-aggravated currency crisis, with the lira plummeting from 1,500 Lebanese lira for the dollar to 10,000 Lebanese lira to the dollar, they are leaving essential shortages throughout the country. How will the Lebanese government fix it, if they can actually fix it?
Well, according to officials, there would be no grain shortage, because most of the grain was already distributed to outlets on one hand, and there are other silos in Tripoli, for example, in addition to shipments coming, not to mention or not to forget about the aid coming from friendly countries, including
Would it be
Iran,
enough to fix
Qatar,
the port?
and other. Fixing the port is another thing, but there would be no shortage of wheat in the country.
Well, the Lebanese government decided to place Beirut port officials under house arrest. Now, what about the four ministers that took turn at the Ministry of Public Works and Transport over the course of the past 6 years? And the judges who actually allowed this case to disappear, what about them?
Well, first, it's not legal to put people under house arrest. Either they are in prison or tried in prison, or they are free to go. So this is, I believe, a legal blasphemy. Limiting it to employees and officials at the port is to spare the ministers, successive ministers since 2014, including Ghazi al-Aridi, the Persian blood minister, who decided to empty the shipment into port of Beirut. And of course the successive not only ministers but also prime ministers who didn't take action. So I believe that it was an attempt to spare them from being tried or sued or even indicted for the act and for the incident.
137 people died and 5,000 injured, and they still want to save their masters.
Well, too bad. Our officials now, our leaders now, are the former warlords who were responsible of 200,000 people killed during the civil war. So another 140 people would not make a big difference for them. Too bad.
Well, the disaster completes the U.S. economic sanctions against Lebanon, whether these sanctions were direct or indirect by targeting Syria itself, which were designed to pressure the Lebanese people to face off with the resistance in Lebanon, which is the biggest enemy for the Zionist entity in the region. How will the resistance, do you think, how will they face this new challenge, especially that this Friday, August 7, was designated as the date in which the Special Tribunal for Lebanon was supposed to pronounce its sentence for the murder of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, but it was delayed because of the tragedy that struck Lebanon. How do you think this new challenge will be faced by the resistance?
Well, this is something to be asked, that the resistance should be asked of, but how they expect them to have acted since the early crisis. I believe that the problem is that the, let's say, the resistance and its allies are not determined on one unified policy. They are unified by their anti-American, let's say, agenda, but they don't have an agenda of their own with regards to drawing relations with alternative regional and international powers, and they don't have an alternative economic policy to face the American pressures. I believe, too bad, I believe that they are trying to gain time until a change in policy in the United States would occur after the elections, but I don't know to what extent the people in Lebanon could withstand this dire situation for another 3 months.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Jamal Wakim, University Professor, for being with us to talk about this national catastrophe in Lebanon. And now please stay tuned for more about this matter, how this explosion will affect the Lebanese economy, with Dr. Nasr Harb in the next segment.
Whoa.
The footage of the destruction of Beirut's port has shocked the world, but Lebanon's long-suffering population are already dealing with the fallout of an economic explosion that has tipped the country into hyperinflation. A ruined city once dubbed as the Paris of the Middle East now serves as a horrendous metaphor for an economic collapse triggered by decades of financial and political mismanagement and endemic corruption. Now, Beirut explosion to worsen Lebanon's crisis in this following report.
On Tuesday evening of August 4, an enormous dockside explosion rocked the Lebanese capital city of Beirut, killing at least 135 people and injuring at least 5,000 more. The source of the explosion was a store of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate kept at the docks for years, Prime Minister Hassan Diab said later on Tuesday. Emergency services are still scrambling to recover any survivors from the rubble. The blast could not have come at a worse time for the country. Since October 2019, the economy had already been in crisis due to rampant government corruption and excessive borrowing, forcing businesses to close and people to lose their jobs. The coronavirus pandemic made everything worse. Lebanon is dependent on its imports, and the global production slowdown due to the coronavirus made goods more expensive, making everyday necessities like bread too expensive for many citizens to afford. Businesses closed for months during the lockdown, and the cost of food skyrocketed, with the price of subsidized bread rising 33% between October and late June. Resulting job cuts have also been sweeping and ruthless. Unemployment is currently at 33%. 45% of Lebanese people live now below the poverty line. Lebanon's currency, the lira, has also depreciated 80% since last October, and the economy shrunk 6.5% in 2019, according to the International Monetary Fund. Lebanon is $90 billion in debt and defaulted on its external debt in March. The government ultimately asked the IMF for $10 billion on April 30. Rolling blackouts lasting as many as 22 hours at a time are also common due to shortages of the oil and diesel needed to power the grid. Lebanon had hoped last year that a change in its top leadership would improve its political and economic crisis. However, the past few months have shown that little has changed, and the devastating explosion is set to make things even worse.
To discuss this issue with us from Beirut is Dr. Nasri Harb, economist at Uzal University. Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Nasri. Now, the blast comes just days after official figures showed that Lebanon's 6.8 million population in the grip of an annual inflation rate of 89.7%, with food prices more than trebling compared to just the year before that. How will this blast affect the already stricken economy in a country like Lebanon?
Yeah, hi Marwa. As if the Lebanese are not missing anything, they have got this on top of the hyperinflation, they got this blast. Actually, when we speak about the cost of such an event, we can divide it into two type of costs. We can speak about the direct cost and the indirect ones. The total of them, they can, up to some estimation, is 10 to 15 billion US dollars. But this is difficult to estimate at this point of time. When we speak about the direct costs, we can speak first about the injuries, the people that we have lost. Many families are suffering from the loss of their main breadwinners. Second point, still on the direct cost, we are speaking about the loss of the port of Beirut itself. Some estimation, like roughly say, it's about 500 to a little more than 500 million US dollars to rebuild it. Plus the damage in the commercial and surrounding residential areas. On top of that, we have lost also the revenues that come from the port of Beirut, which were estimated recently at around more than 300 billion US dollars. 300 million US dollars. Around 40% of them are net profit. These are all revenues that have been lost. We have also the stock of merchandise that were in the port as well, in the containers. Moreover, still in the direct cost, we can speak about the damage in the sewage system, the water system, the electricity, the power. Some of these damage will appear immediately, but other may take time to appear. But now the bulk of the cost can be seen at the indirect cost. First of all, we have thousands of jobs that have been lost, okay, over the next few weeks. The port of Beirut is basically the main gate of the Lebanese economy. 70% of the merchandise of the total imports, well, other estimates say it's 90. Let's say 70% of the import come from the port of Beirut. And the volume of our imports in Lebanon are around 20 billion, 19 billion US dollars, which is about 40% of the economy, of our income, which means يعني نحن our main source of raw material, of intermediate goods is now closed, is shut down. We cannot use it. So imagine that the supply of raw material to the local manufacturing and to the local industries have been lost. It will take time to re-establish new routes.
But this new route, or any establishing any means of fixing the problem, may be faced with a wall, and this wall may be the Lebanese elite, the culture, the elite's culture of bribery, of embezzlement, nepotism, you name it. And it has put us among the world's most corrupt countries. Now, according to, for example, the World Bank, nearly half the population in Lebanon are now living either in poverty or below the poverty line. And along comes this blast that occurred due to the neglect and the nepotism of this of the governments that were consecutive on Lebanon, and because of certain elite who govern the port also. What options does this current government have to try and fix this huge disaster?
Well, let's see it this way. We have an enormously indebted country with a troubled banking sectors. The options are quite limited. In the short run, what we can do is we can recur to other regional ports, such as the port of Beirut, despite its lower capacity. We can recur to the previously accord with Syria to use their port of Latakia and of Tartus also.
That brings out the sanctions deal.
Yes, but we have an agreement with Syria as well. But this is, again, this makes it difficult and needs some political decision. We have also the air transportation as well. Let me tell you this, that's in the short run. I'm not speaking now, I will speak about the long run. What we are speaking now, we are speaking about a closed economy. We are closing our economy, we are reducing the level of our trade, international trade. Well, imagine like we are an example of Gaza, okay, which is a closed economy. So you can imagine the other extreme, where we can head to. Now, in the long run, we have other options, but this will take some courage from the government.
Well, these other options that you may be talking about might be financing coming from other places, maybe other institutions in the world, but it's highly unlikely that Lebanon will be able to unlock the financing that it needs to overcome its fundamental economic problems. Now, some partners may be even reluctant to provide any sort of help because of the U.S. sanctions and because of the U.S. threats in case they do help us. However, finances due to this particular blast are needed now. Not tomorrow, right now. How are we going to get them?
Well, nobody trusts the Lebanese politicians. That's a period, okay? The Western country have provided many loans to the Lebanese government previously, okay, with no accountability, okay? Now, given the U.S. sanctions now, okay, now they are more accurate and they are more vigilant. They want to know where the money goes to. Again, nobody is willing to give out. All what we can get currently is some urgent relief, emergency stuff and medical stuff. Okay, and for only those who have lost shelters and those who need some medical treatment. I doubt anyone can help. But if anyone can help, this needs an action from the government, a courage action from the government to request.
How do you think they should operate then?
This needs a political consensus, I don't know. Lebanon is very difficult to take an action. To take a courage political decision. But I believe... You
mean stop the elite and maybe held them accountable for one time in their lives?
I don't think this will be possible at this point of time, even though it's an opportunity to do so, because the Lebanese population is now outraged and is supporting the government for any political action that it can take. I believe this is an opportunity. Moreover, what I believe in is that if our local government takes an action in order to get financing from the East, which is really possible, I don't think other country will just be looking at. They will also provide other relief for the country, other funds for the country. I can remember here the aftermath of the 2006 war, when the Iranian government pledged some funds for the Lebanese government to rebuild to reconstruct after the Israeli war. After that time, in order not to leave the Lebanese economy in the hands, let's say, in the hands of the Iranian economy, in the hands of Iran, many other countries have pledged other funds to participate in the reconstruction.
That just brings the challenge to another level, because Iran is also itself facing a lot of sanctions which might not put that option, would not let it put that option on the table to begin with. I want to thank you very much. I apologize because that's all the time we have. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll meet again and talk more about this. Dr. Nasri Harb, economist at Uzal University, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for watching. Please stay tuned next week for more from the Mideastream.